Dr. Jerome Corsi is going to join us for the balance of the hour, and I appreciate him coming on. We're going to get into this. We're going to get into his article where Perry is still doing public-private partnerships, Trans-Texas, NAFTA Superhighway in pieces. And people say, I was on Mancal yesterday, and he said, well, why is it important if it's in Texas? He was asking a rhetorical question. He knew why. A really smart guy, Eric Muller. And I said, Eric, there's 40-plus major interstate highways, another 40 other corollary roads that they, in the official Department of Transportation documents, say they want to take over, put taxes on, and fund the North American Union with. And it's an artery right down to the Pacific side of Mexico with the biggest port now in the hemisphere to bring in Chinese goods. And it's an international corridor, like the Romans used roads to control things. And I made the film Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, almost 3 hours long. About 30 minutes of it is on this subject. And it shows Bush giving speeches saying we've merged the North American Union with the EU, all the agreements. I mean, we're already way down the hole here. So all of that's going on. And that's what this is about. We're already under a North American Union. But the states twice voted it down. Texas is the main funding artery to fund it all the way up into Canada. They've got mile markers all the way to Canada. It's marked for mile markers all the way for something like 2,000 miles. But they just call it the I-35 shoot-around outside Austin. But it goes all the way to San Antonio. It's there. And CNN, I've played the clips, you've seen it, would say Ron Paul 4 years ago is insane. There is no Texas Superhighway. There is no Trans-Texas Corridor. We had billboards all over the state with a cowboy going, I like the Trans-Texas Corridor and paying tolls. And they had ads going, yeah, it's Trans-Texas Corridor. Texas is proud to be part of the NAFTA Superhighway system. I'd go to movies and see ads before the movies going, Texas is a proud part of the North American Union. I appreciate all you're doing. Meanwhile, we go, hey, we don't want this. It doesn't exist. And that's a psychological warfare term called gaslighting. Is a form of psychological abuse in which false information is presented with the intent of making a victim doubt his or her own memory, perception, and sanity. Instances may range simply from the denial by an abuser that previous abuse incidents ever occurred, or even the staging of bizarre events by the abuser with the intention of disorienting the victim. That's why they'll have school drills unannounced where they aim guns at kids. It happened to my crew who's got kids in public school. They come and bang on the elementary and say, we're here to kill you. And the kids all cry and get scared. And they go, the teachers go, you know, following a manual, we're sorry we had to do this. It's because of American gun owners. In one manual in Michigan, the feds issued, it was, we're sorry to do this. This was due to homeschoolers and people against public education. That's AP. If you think I'm joking, they go, sorry, we just blew up a car in the front parking lot and came and said we were going to kill you. And children literally urinate on themselves. Teachers have had to go to funny farms over it. Literally, this has been in the news, have breakdowns where they marched people out saying they're going to kill them in mask and don't tell them it's a drill. That was in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Okay, I'm ranting. We'll go to our guest. I just want to introduce this because some stations just joined us in this hour. That it is a psychological warfare program, and the police are being brainwashed, too, to just accept this. Now they're announcing checkpoints all over the country to stop gangs and look for illegal guns. The hammer's being dropped, and Dr. Corsi can break this down. He, of course, has worked for the State Department and national security in classified areas. He has a Harvard Ph.D. in political science. He's worked for, Fortune, top mega banks, you name it. I'm not going to go over his whole bio. He's got, I don't know, 3 or 4 #1 New York Times bestsellers. But this is the total takeover. And the Republicans, you notice, $1 of cuts for every $41 in tax increases. 77% of Americans, massive tax increases. Obama lying about that. They're announcing total open borders, total legalization. They're going for our guns everywhere. It's on. Checkpoints, everything. Dr. Corsi, how bad is it? It's even worse than I thought it would be. What is your take? Why is it moving so quickly? I mean, it is like the dam has broken.
Well, I think it's a rush to the finish line. I think the New World Order sees an opportunity. With the article I wrote in the WorldNet Daily, WND, just over the holidays, it's clear that Governor Perry, with the Trans-Texas Corridor, that it's back. I mean, I researched it and found that now there's something like $20 billion in road work underway throughout Texas on these public-private partnerships. That's the key idea. the public-private partnership. In other words, and typically three of these deals I looked at in particular, this State Highway 130 near San Antonio, extensions of I-35 around Dallas-Fort Worth, Cintra, C-I-N-T-R-A in Spain, which was the company that was going to do the full development of the Trans-Texas Corridor, the 4,000 miles that Governor Perry proposed before we exposed it, and they had to withdraw the plan in disgrace. But the Cintra is going to build these highways on 50-year leases, where, for instance, let's say Cintra puts up $5 billion. The state of Texas subsidizes with $1 billion. Cintra builds the extension to the road. Now they're doing it piece by piece. And Cintra gets to run the toll road for 50 years on a 50-year lease, and Cintra in Spain collects the tolls from the motorists driving in Texas. And again, this was something that Governor Perry said he'd put an end to. 2009, there was a pledge to end the Trans-Texas Corridor with Cintra.
Well, don't forget, you've seen the clips where the CNN just said it didn't even exist.
Right, exactly. I mean, they're still denying that any of this planning exists, or that, you know, Winnipeg up in Canada has been declared by Prime Minister Harper to be an inland port, and they're building the same infrastructure.
What's incredible is the meetings, the maps, all of it's 100% public, and then they first announced it even in Time Magazine, and then when we don't like it, they go, "You're crazy, that doesn't exist."
Well, they deny it. They laugh about it. They, you know, if you remember up in Montebello in Canada, when you know, they were asked, Harper and Bush, and at that time the president of Mexico, three of them meeting in the Security and Prosperity Partnership, if there was going to be a NAFTA Superhighway that was going to combine three nations in this continent, North America, into an international transportation system. And Harper laughed at it and he said, "Oh yes, it may be intraplanetary." And then, of course, he comes out and announces that Winnipeg is going to be an inland port, and that the government of Canada is committed to building an international transportation structure that ties into trade in China.
Well, it's all in the SPP documents. We're going to be right back to get into this, but then I want to get into the guns with you, and I want to get into the Middle East, Benghazi, because you're an expert on this. Alex Jones here with a very important announcement for truth seekers. We've carried a lot of amazing films and books over the years on the online video bookstore at Infowars.com. And out of all the titles we've carried, one stands out because it is just so chillingly convincing. And that's Dreams from My Real Father by Joel Gilbert, available at Infowars.com. This film exposes the fraud that Obama is like nothing I've seen. If you want to know who Obama's real daddy is, this is the film for you. Don't forget, your purchase supports our broadcast and our growing media network. You'll also find at InfoWarsShop.com, None Dare Call a Conspiracy by Gary Allen, the book that woke me up. We're also carrying Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21 by Rosa Corey. This book is coffin nails to the globalist takeover. The Greater Good, the most professional and up-to-date film I've ever seen exposing the scourge that is vaccines. These titles and a lot more are all available at InfoWarsShop.com. To be kind to Dr. Jerome Corsi, who's with us. Again, I'm your host, Alex Jones. I've been right up front in this, going to the Campo board meetings, watching the takeover, reading the SPP documents that Judicial Watch sued and got. And I know Dr. Corsi's been on this even more than I have, but watching in Texas, they don't even follow their agreements. In fact, most of the new toll road stuff is built off existing toll roads on roads they're not even supposed to put them on. They break the law and do that. Bush signed an executive order. I guess they say that makes it all right. I guess they could sign an executive order saying the moon was made of cheese. And then most of these new roads get paid for with taxpayer money, and then Cintra just gets the money. But I want to get into that, and that's why I originally asked the guys to get you on, Dr. Corsi, and I appreciate you coming on. But what about the overall? I'm going to go back into it. I know you're focused on this now, but what about the overall going after the guns? I know you've been writing about that, and the Republicans selling out to massive tax increases. I mean, they're trying to collectivize this country. They know massive tax increases are going to shut the economy off, but I guess that's the plan to get people on welfare.
let's first deal with the guns. I mean, I wrote an article, also sent it into your producers there on the shooting that was, the recent shooting in the elementary school in Sandy Hook. And I interviewed some of the top psychiatrists in the world, Dr. David Healy, who's in Great Britain, Peter Bregan, Harvard trained, formerly full-time consultant to the National Institute of Mental Health. And they universally told me that these kids who are shooting in the schools, these incidences are almost 90% linked with the medications prescribed to these kids by psychiatrists. In other words, what happens is these school shootings, a kid, let's say in school, is a little bit difficult to deal with and maybe has some problems at home. So immediately the doctors come in and they diagnose the kid as having some psychological disorder, an attention deficit disorder. They get him psychiatric treatment and put him on forced medication, Ritalin or Prozac or any number of other very powerful drugs. And these are psychotropic drugs, and they produce, especially in these adolescents, a form of suicidal and violent outbursts. So that if you look at the incidents that have occurred and track down who these shooters are, you're going to find that about 90%, especially the high-profile cases, these kids were on medication prescribed by psychiatrists on behavioral problems, which may or may not have been real, or may have just been an attempt to control a difficult kid in a school environment.
And by the way, I covered your article last week, and when you say 90%, these scientists, these doctors are being conservative, they count the few gang-related shootings where 3 or 4 people shoot each other as in that, and in those cases, they're usually just drug dealers. So that's why it goes down to 90. If you look at the real mass shootings, it's always goth, whites or Hispanics who are avowed devil worshippers. I mean, every case, they are into the occult, they are avowed devil worshippers, and they are on psychotropic drugs. I mean, it's more like 100%. In fact, I can't find cases where the real mass shooters, where it's like 10, 15, 20 people, and it's not gang-related, aren't on these drugs.
Well, in fact, Dr. Bregan was particularly good. He said a lot of these kids are just kids that in a normal environment, you go back 40, 50 years, first of all, you'd have God in the school. You'd have parents around that could be involved. The kid might need some attention, might be a lonely kid. Now the school, which doesn't really want to deal with the kids in general, in particular, they don't want to spend any teacher time. The teachers aren't trained. So they get the psychiatrists involved. They prescribe these extremely powerful drugs.
They put them on suicide pills. The insert says causes you to commit mass murder and suicide.
And these pills are extremely dangerous, psychotropic effects, which produce the suicidal tendencies and the violent tendencies. The kids further withdraw. They withdraw into these video games, which are, killing video games in this created world of fantasy of killing and violence. And then when these kids act it out in reality in a school, people are surprised. I mean, there's no reason to be surprised.
Doctor, if you study Chinese-style mind control and CIA, it's drugging with scenarios. These video games were designed to create instinctive killing by the U.S. military, non-thinking. You put them on mind control drugs and put them on a Pentagon killing simulator, what do you think you're going to get?
Well, and in fact, a lot of these video games were created by the military in order to increase the percentage of soldiers in combat that would actually use lethal force. It's one of the little appreciated secrets of combat going back to the Revolutionary
Break this down, Doctor. Break it down on the other side. We'll be right back. Dr. Corsi is probably more qualified to talk about Benghazi than anybody I probably know. And I should have gotten him on the last few months about that. It's just that it gets lost in the shuffle. And I'm jumping in, chomping at the bit, wanting to back up everything he says because it's so on target. I want to get into that and Hillary's feigned garbage and all this other stuff that's going on and where he sees America in general going. Does he agree with my analysis that it is just runaway train right now? Is there any way to stop the takeover? Why do the globalists think it's their opportunity? Is it a response to seeing an awakening happening? They're trying to head us off at the pass. I want to get his take on that. I want to go back into the NAFTA Superhighway because it ties in to this tactic now that those of us that are awake go, this is ridiculous and discrediting that they announced there's no global government being formed, but in hundreds of financial papers, they brag how they're forming a world government run by private banks. So why are they doing that? Well, because we're informed. The general public, folks, doesn't know where their state capital is. You have to understand, people think of knowing things as work. They never discover that knowing things is addictive and is what really being alive is. And so you got to understand, I mean, the general public is just not even dumb. They're ignorant. And this tactic of just lying, I mean, at hospitals everywhere, everybody I know goes into the hospital and they say, we're not going to fix your broken leg till you take a flu shot. And they're like, but you have to render care. And they go, we're not going to. Get out. I mean, it's totally illegal on so many fronts. I mean, I've had lawyers on. It's that's what tyranny is. It's a willful criminal oppression. And they're just doing it. And now they're going to set up armored checkpoints all over the highways to, quote, check for gang members. It's just incredible. Dr. Corsi, getting back to what you were going to talk about with, for those that don't know, the statistics from World War I, World War II on troops wouldn't kill people up close. So the Department of Defense developed, and you're right, this is something even foreign governments really didn't pick up on for a while. It's given the, quote, United States the edge. Murder simulators, killer simulators. Tell people about that.
Well, these original combat video games were developed by the military around the time of Vietnam, because the little-known secret is that in combat, most of the killing in person is done by 2 or 3% of the troops. A lot of troops will not use violence, lethal violence, where they can actually see the enemy, even when they're in danger themselves. So in Vietnam, our troops exposed to these kinds of games were able to get the kill ratio up to about 90%. 90% of the people in combat would be willing to use lethal force. And that's where these games started, because psychologically, they engineer desensitization, or desensitized process to where killing another human being or using lethal force against another human being is no longer repugnant. It becomes acceptable in the frame of behavior for the person to find for themselves. That in combination with the type of psychotropic drugs that we are regularly handing out in our schools is a formula for disaster. Kids play these games, get programmed for violence, take the drugs affect their psychology and their thinking, they become suicidal and violent, and then we wonder why we have the incidents in the schools.
And we wonder why the military has record suicide. And we wonder why the U.S., the #1 cause of death now is suicide. Wasn't in the top 10 50 years ago. In fact, folks, you can show ABC News. #1 cause of unnatural death now suicide. We're a nation on suicide mass murder pills. And the social engineers know this full well. And
of course they do. And I want to skip to, you know, with the time we've got, I've been writing again about the economics. I have an article out today that Ben Bernanke, in the time he's been in the Fed, which started in February 1, 2006, on December 12th, which is when they announced this QE4, another round of buying our own debt, that period of time from 2006 to December 12th, 2012, Bernanke doubled the amount of national debt. We went from $8.13 trillion to $16.4 trillion. And this is, again, another conscious process of destroying the United States. This QE4, quantitative easing 4, which is the economist term for it, means that we're going to be buying monthly $85 billion of our own treasury securities and mortgage-backed securities, which keeps interest rates artificially low, but is essentially creating so much liquidity that the dollar is becoming debased. And it's setting up the precondition for hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is now an inevitability. It's built into the system. And again, the economists know this because in the crisis of hyperinflation, crisis of all these mountains of debt, the Americans will give up freedom. They'll move into an international environment. They'll allow the...
And by the way, you worked in banking at the highest level, so again, you are uniquely able to speak to this. What's the time frame? How bad is it going to get?
Well, it's going to get, first of all, we're going to be at a point where we may double again the national debt, not within, may not take us 6 years this time. We may do it within 3 or 4 years. Certainly, we're going to be over $20 trillion by 2014. And when we get over $20 trillion, remember, our gross national product is under $16 trillion.
Unbelievable.
So by the end of 2014, which is in 2 years, when we're coming up with the next congressional election, I expect us to be in another economic crisis of hyperinflation. And this whole deal of fiscal cliff is a fiction. We went over the fiscal cliff a long time ago. This recent legislation did nothing to solve the fiscal crisis of the United States. We actually have more spending in the bill that was just passed in this emergency fashion. And the idea that people, again, lies were rampant. Obama was saying that no middle-class taxes were going to be increased. 77% of Americans who pay taxes are going to have an increase because of the phasing out of the 2% relief that was granted on the FICA reductions on payroll taxes. That's going back in. So, even though this lie was told, Obama will say, well, I didn't mean that. But people are still going to get smaller take-home pay, and they can judge for themselves whether they were lied to. The federal government lies to us regularly. The Obama now lies boldly and doesn't even get called for it by the mainstream media. And this whole idea of increasing our debt to a proportion that's unprecedented in the history of the world, buying our own debt. I mean, you have to get your mind around the Treasury is issuing debt and we are buying it in the Federal Reserve. It's so insane. And at some point or other, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep printing money. This is just blatantly printing money. And the liquidity may boost the stock market, but eventually, like the Weimar Republic, you get into hyperinflation. And the authorities doing this, including Ben Bernanke, know that it is inevitable that they're going to debase the dollar. In fact, it's a plan to debase the dollar. You can't look at it any other way. Now, I sent in the links. I just published a book on Obama's plan to bankrupt the United States. And this goes to the Cloward-Piven theory. And I really think it's critical people understand what the Cloward...
And we're going to put your new book up, and we've been showing WorldNet Daily and the information. In fact, I want to get this book. I haven't read it yet. We've carried your other books, but I know this is going to be powerful because I know their game plan as well. And what's incredible is, and I know you know about this, you've written about it, they brag that they're bankrupting us. Communists don't bankrupt things on accident. We always say communists are bad managers and, quote, things don't work. Because of the incredible production of the last 100 years and science, even in a communist system, if it wasn't run by devils, it'd be horrible and it would be unfair, but everything wouldn't collapse. They collapsed Ukraine and Poland on purpose. This is not a secret. They collapsed China and killed between 60 and 80 million people, they debate the numbers, to radically transform forever. They understand you've got to break eggs to make an omelet. It's about the control. And so the goal is going well. More people in prison, more people on welfare, paying to ship General Motors to China. I mean, this is a plan. And I've read the review of your book. I know it breaks down where they say it's their plan. So explain to people, they're not, California, when they raise taxes over and over again, that's meant to bankrupt the state. I mean, explain this to people.
Cloward and Piven were two sociologists at Columbia when Obama was there, when Brzezinski was there. And their whole idea was that to destroy capitalism, you create social welfare programs, all the unemployment insurance, the Obama phones, the entire list of, programs where the government is paying checks to people. And you build this system to the point where it is so huge, you've got to raise the tax base in order to pay these welfare payments, social welfare payments, entitlements, that the system collapses because the taxes destroy the economic activity, the tax base decreases, the system goes into bankruptcy, and then the Cloward and Piven, the sociologists, said that this is the time when we really have the opportunity to create a true socialist, read communist state, in which the principles of social justice, meaning destroying private property, destroying the family, having government control of every aspect of your life, having the bureaucrats make all decisions, including death panels on health insurance, 100% government control of all the means of production. This is what the communist dream has been. And the Cloward-Piven theory is a way to make the Democratic Party essentially advocate the socialist themes, welfare. We're trying to help you. We care about you. Want unemployment insurance. And then by putting the tax burden to these unreasonable levels, having debt go beyond the ability to pay the debt off, the system goes into bankruptcy, collapses, and in the ashes, out of the ashes is born a true socialist or communist state. That's the goal. That's Obama.
And they're going to look to the 90% that don't have jobs anymore from overtaxation and say, we got to kill the old people because it costs. They're already saying this in Slate and Soros outfits. I mean, it's so diabolical. And remember, Doctor, they always said, oh, there's no death panels. We're like, it's in the bill. No, there's not. Oh, there's no NAFTA highway. What do you make of them coming out and saying that Israelis don't own guns and they don't arm teachers? I mean, the level of lying, these people make the Politburo look honest.
In fact, the Democrats were going to propose this legislation. It themselves own guns and are protected by guns. If you go into a federal building, you try to go into the U.S. Congress, you're going to go through metal detectors, you're going to go through all kinds of federal agencies with badges, with guns, examining everything you've got before you get in that building, wanting to know where you're going to go. But the bureaucrats that want these gun-free environments don't themselves operate in a gun-free environment because they know how dangerous it would be.
Well, they're mafia. Mafia always wants to disarm its slaves. Here's my question. What is the general prognosis? Am I right? And Larry Pratt saying this is the worst assault ever. Ron Paul, I mean, I want your view on this and then your analysis. How bad is it? Because they now look gleeful and are attacking on every front. And the Republican leadership is collapsing and just saying, yes, this is what we're going to do because the foreign banks are buying both sides.
The GOP is in disarray. The globalists and the socialists the far left, the Bill Ayers crowd has stolen the leadership of the Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party of Jack Kennedy or Hubert Humphrey or Harry Truman. That party's dead. This is the radical left, the socialists, read communists, hijacking the Democratic Party and putting their agenda in the name of progressive.
I saw another Slate article today calling to get rid of our free speech. I mean, these people are monsters.
Assaults are going to be left and right. You get a Sandy Hook coming on, immediately the New World Order agenda jumps on this for gun legislation. The worst possible thing. And then when the NRA tries to hold a press conference, they get ridiculed by the mainstream media, the demonstrations, the acting up, the agenda is not heard. The lies are being told. Yes, teachers are armed in Israel. Yes, if you walk around Israel, there are automatic weapons being held by off-duty military in uniform. It's a very militarized environment because it's the only way it's safe. And in fact, if you do create these gun-free zones, the truth is, like Chicago, you're going to create a free killing zone.
And then they bring the military in as the answer. See how they do it? They take the citizens' guns. It becomes a crime system. Then they bring in troops, which is they're now doing.
and rely on the government to protect you, which is exactly our founding fathers advised us, do not rely on the government to do anything for you.
Let me ask you this. Are they going to win? I mean, how bad is it?
Well, it's the closest to the globalists and the socialist communist left winning. And they're using the Saul Alinsky agenda. Obama is going to, again, you've got to read these two ebooks I wrote. The one on the Saul Alinsky, the evil genius behind Obama, and Obama's plan to bankrupt the USA, the Cloward-Piven theory, because it explains what they're doing. They're using the class warfare, resentment against the rich. We've got to tax the rich. Even with Obama getting this agreement on the fiscal cliff, he's already saying in videotape presentations to his constituency, the Obama for America crowd, that he hasn't taxed the rich are still not paying their fair share. They won't
Howard Dean came out and said the poorest people need to pay more taxes.
Well, in fact, the point is that the socialist agenda, nobody in the end owns any private property.
Except the master bureaucrats who are exempt from all the rules.
And are protected by the military, do not themselves live in gun-free zones, don't give up their weapons. But in fact...
No, they all have bodyguards. That's a status symbol with them.
Bodyguards. And you go into a federal building that you don't have to go through a metal detector with badges and guns.
Michael Moore has 5 to 6 bodyguards every time I've seen him. Piers Morgan has armed bodyguards. I mean, it's all on record.
Hypocrisy and the lying of the New World Order and this Bill Ayers left, that this Obama left, has never been greater. They're lying about everything, saying, oh, no, we don't have a NAFTA Super Highway. There's no public-private partnerships here. Then you look and you find there's $20 billion of deals that Governor Perry has signed with with Cintra in Spain.
No, they bragged in the AP years ago. They said Perry's just going ahead in chunks. I mean, it's not a secret. They just laugh at us. Incredible. Just stay there, Doc. We got to go to break. I want to come back and get more into just the economy. I mean, is there any way to turn this around? How bad is it going to get? And then we'll have the third hour with a bunch of special reports we're going to premiere here.
As we saw in Katrina, and as we are watching now in New York and New Jersey, the federal government can't and won't help you in a crisis. FEMA ran out of water and MREs in days. Electricity is still off to over 1 million people. The Red Cross, who is quick to beg for money, is now slow to react. Don't put it off any longer. Get prepared today. While you're on InfoWarsShop.com, check out these other great preparedness items. The Aquapod kit lets you store up to 65 gallons of water in your bathtub. The Pocket Socket provides you with manual electricity for small electronics like your cell phone. The Life Straw is great for your bug-out bag. And check out our complete line of Interfood products for great tasting and nutritionally dense foods that have a great shelf life. If you are looking to secure your home in a crisis, you can order Strategic Relocations, the film, a great companion to the book Strategic Relocations 3rd edition, and The Secure Home by Joel Skousen. When the time to perform arrives, the time to prepare has already passed. Get prepared now, so if a crisis strikes your home, you and your family will be secure. Go to InfoWarsShop.com.
We've got an extremely powerful video piece we did to counter Mayor Bloomberg's piece with all the different actors saying, turn your guns in. One of our listeners, again, I'm proud that our listeners are so active, put out a video showing how each actor in there is in these movies involved in gratuitous mass murder and shooting, which then anti-gunners who aren't even gun owners, because there's not just the predatory anti-gunners who know they want to disarm us and make us slaves. There's folks who've never had guns, and they think of guns like Hollywood, that every time a gun's out, somebody's Uziing someone. And they're real scared of them. And Hollywood helps do that. And one of our listeners put out a video that's had millions of views because DrudgeReport.com linked to it. And then Fox News picked it up and all these other channels. That's what I keep telling listeners. I'm nobody special, folks. And I've reached 15 million people a week now, one way or another. okay? People like Dr. Corsi, who's well-researched and smart. He reaches millions every week in interviews and his books. One of our listeners, because I went to his channel and saw, he listens to the show and some of his videos, went and did something that's been seen by tens of millions now. And we're going to put a video out that hopefully will get seen by millions that really counters Bloomberg. It's up to you, though. And just thank God for Drudge. Listen, I got to say something, Dr. Corsi. I'm not just kissing the rumpus of DrudgeReport.com. I've been tracking it, and more, it's WorldNet Daily, it's InfoWars, but we're like Junior when it comes to really just every time Drudge is able to take our information and others and his research and really force it out there. And I see the system always demonizing Drudge because they don't like it. And I think it's a tale and an example, an allegory of the fact that we can win. If we get aggressive now, so let me ask you solutions in this segment and 5 into the next hour. I know you've got to go. What can we do to really beat these people? Because even a lot of folks don't like socialism, but their jobs have been shipped overseas. They're disabled, and Obama's going to give them money until he fully takes over. Then he's going to euthanize you. What can we do as solutions, Dr. Corsi?
Well, I think, first of all, you're right about Drudge. Drudge is doing yeoman's work, and so are you, Alex. We're in the battle. We're doing it every day as well at WND. The weapon we've got is the truth, and we've got to keep developing and presenting the truth to the American people. We've got the advantages of being able to communicate with millions of people through the internet. We've got the ability to get the word out, and people are reading and paying attention. In the next few years, we're going to have to learn how to even use social media more effectively, how to use all of these techniques of reaching people one by one in their homes, knowing who our listeners are. There's great advances coming in the ability, I believe, to technologically reach people and communicate with people individually, but in large numbers. But the advantage we've got is the truth. And I think if we keep going back to it, I mean, every one of the articles I write, Alex, I footnote. I've got all kinds. You can go look at the original sources. That's what made the articles of the North American Union, going back to when I was writing the late great USA in 2005, 2006, so powerful, was I linked to their own documents, the government's own documents. If you look at the article I have on Bernanke increasing our debt, I linked to the Federal Reserve minutes in which that is announced, which is a document that's boring. Most people don't want to read it. But when you see it, it's startling, because there the Federal Reserve is telling you they're going to buy $85 billion a month. I mean, that's staggering. It's like, we're going to buy $1 trillion of our own debt. And as if that's, buying your own debt is like having a printing press in your basement. So checks come in, don't worry about it. We'll just keep printing money and send out, pay the bills.
But the globalists, they get real goods for that, and then we get handed the debt when most of it's derivative. Stay there. Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds? Dr. Jerome Corsi's got to leave in about 4 or 5 minutes. He's got another interview coming up. And again, I've been covering the whole field here, throwing stuff at him, but finishing up with solutions. I guess the solution is the truth, as you said, and knowing what their plans are, bankrupting America. How do you expect things to go? Sure, people are waking up, but the power structure is accelerating things. In your gut, how do you see things ending? And in your gut, are you the most concerned you've ever been?
I'm the most concerned I've ever been. And we're going to have a series of crises that are produced, that the only solution offered is more government control by both parties, Democrats and Republicans alike. This is where the Tea Party's got to recognize that the Republican Party is not necessarily a natural home for a conservative movement. It's not only exposing the truth, which we got to do, but it's exposing the hypocrisy of the socialists, the communists, the Obamas. Obama lives he's talking about, the rich don't pay their fair share. Well, Obama's living a life that would make most kings and queens in history pale in comparison to the privileges he gives himself and his family. We've got to expose this. Al Gore does not live a carbon efficient life. None of these people. Michael Moore is protected by weapons, as is Nancy Pelosi, as is Senator Feinstein, and Chuck Schumer. All these people go into a federal building to work all day, where you go through a metal detector and there's guards all over the place to protect them. The hypocrisy is what exposes the New World Order, the lies and the hypocrisy. And the crises are what I'm concerned about, because the capability of producing, people got to understand this Cloward-Piven theory, that the engineered bankruptcy that we're in, this expansion of the entitlement programs, is a plan. It's a plan to cause capitalism to crumble, so people will give up freedom.
And then they blame capitalism when we've left capitalism, and this is crony fascist socialism.
Removal of God from everywhere. This is a major theme. The school in which the kid who's on, psychiatrically prescribed drugs, playing all day video games at his home, comes into that school. You couldn't even use the word God in that school without being arrested.
But then Obama would pray once it came time. They still give us the old thing every once in a while, like it's a treat they give us to then punch our buttons. It's all masterfully done. And you get back to that. When you remove God, the devil comes in. It's funny, all these killers, they're not atheists, they're devil worshipers.
Play the God theme like music on, an organ to get our emotions going. So we say, oh, isn't it horrible? We've got to get the guns out of the schools. No, you've got to get armed guards in the schools. You got to get these kids, so the teachers in the teachers union who don't want to spend any time dealing with problem children can't just send them off to a psychiatrist and give them Ritalin or Prozac or some other.
Well, look, I'll say this. It'd be better to put kids in a boot camp to get their butts kicked than assault them with Prozac and Ritalin that literally destroys their hearts and brains and organs. And again, that's the problem. When I did stuff wrong, I got my butt whipped. The coaches whipped my butt. They'd make me run till I threw up. And thank God they did, or I'd have probably been in prison. These kids need discipline. And the social engineers, Dr. Spock and all them, they bragged. They knew. They knew what they were doing.
They knew exactly what they're doing. This is no longer freedom. It's no longer producing character. It's about control, producing control. So those in power, the teachers union, the socialists running the Democratic Party, they control everyone. And whenever they want more control or more power, they create a crisis. A bunch of people are killed. People are starving. They bring out God, roll out God for 20 minutes. Barack Obama's not going to let God be on the horizon. Watch how many times he refers to God in the second inaugural.
No, he says we are not a Christian nation. God bless you, sir. We'll talk to you again soon. The battle for the Republic is now. Thank you, Dr. Corsi.
Thank you, Alex. Keep up the fight.
I will, sir. You too. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.